right, so maybe before we start, how about a show of hands for people working in the video game industry? All right, that's quite a few. All right, so basically, I guess my talk, it's going to be about 25 minutes. Try to keep about 5 minutes for Q&A at the end. And it's really back to basic in terms of video game production and design. So before I go any further, just really quickly a little bit about me. So I've been doing this for about 20 years. I've worked for Ubisoft, Electronic Arts, and other companies, and currently very happy at King. Some notable games I've shipped include Prince of Persia, were within while I was at Ubisoft, MMO, World Series of Poker Mobile for Electronic Arts, and more just recently Shuffle Cats at King. I have shipped 2 games in Unity, including Monkey Quest, which was an MMO using Unity. And my background is a lead programmer, so I'm quite technical as well. So if after you have some questions, happy to go technical as well. So we're going to talk about design. And so I've been doing this for a long time, and what I realize often some game teams struggle with their design, and so I thought it might be useful to go through some, I'm going to call them the cardinal rules, and of course feel free to break them, but and hopefully this will be useful for you. So the first one is when you're designing your game, decide what the game pillars are. What is the game about? And you're allowed 3 game pillars. You're not allowed 4, 5, or 10, because I mean, you're going to be losing focus if you start having too many. So for Shuffle Cats, we wanted it to be a multiplayer game. We want it to be social. It's a card game, so think of a classic card game like Rummy, except multiplayer, and you can play with people worldwide. That's what Shuffle Cats is. And we wanted it to be tailored, so we didn't want to copy a classic card game. We wanted it to be a bespoke experience for mobile. So those were our 3 design pillars for Shuffle Cats specifically. So for those of you working on games, what are your design pillars? And then this becomes super helpful, because when you're adding or thinking about adding features, you need to ask yourself the question, is this supporting one of our 3 pillars? And if the answer is not, well, ditch the feature. You don't need it. It is not core to your game. And I see a lot of game teams in my career struggle because they're just trying to do a little bit of everything. That is a recipe for disaster. Focus on your core gameplay and on your design pillars. The second, I guess, piece of advice I have is you need to consider that features for the short, medium, and long term. So what is, of course, your second-to-second gameplay? So in an endless runner, you might be jumping and avoiding obstacles, things of that nature. So that's your second-to-second gameplay. But what is your medium and long-term goals? So at King, we had the privilege of having some consultants who work with some of the biggest companies in the world come to us about design. And in terms of making sure people retain and stick to your game, basically they said the 2 most powerful things are when players self-formulate a goal. So you're not dangling a carrot. You really have the player saying, you know what, I'm going to save up enough currency in the game because I want to buy this new car that goes faster. And it's going to take me a little while to get there. I need to win 20 races, but I'm going to be so happy when I get the Ferrari or the Tesla or whatever it is at the end. That is a self-formulated goal. That is, from a psychology point of view, very strong behavioral thing to do. So you really want to make sure when you look at your core game loops, what is your core gameplay, but what do you have that keeps people coming back, you know, after a day, after 7 days, but also after a month, after 2 months. So very important to think about those things. The other recommendations I have as well, looking at some of you know, projects that have failed in the past, is they try to innovate in too many areas all at once. My recommendation to you guys is innovate in only one place at a time. It's already very difficult to innovate. Just pick one thing, you know, learn about it, do it really well, and then you can innovate on something else after. But really innovate in one area. This brings me to a little bit deciding where you want your game to be. And the cool thing is you've got a really wide range. So when you see the term maybe red ocean means you're going to do a game in a game genre that's already really busy. So of course, if you're doing a match 3 game, you've got a ton of competition out there. You've got, you know, of course, all of the king games, but we've got a lot of competitors that have, you know, very nicely polished games as well, and they're doing also quite well. So you can decide, hey, I want to be red ocean. I'm not innovating at all. I'm using a proven game mechanic that I'm going to just execute so well, polish so well, and I'm going to understand my audience and what they're doing really well. And you can do super well even though you're in a very crowded space from a market point of view. Blue ocean is, hey, I'm going to do an experimental horror VR game. You're in the blue ocean. There's probably not a ton of competitors out there. So you've got first mover's advantage, of course, because you're the first person doing it. And with that comes a lot of risk and probably a smaller market that you're going to need to consider. So again, when you're innovating, think about what you want to do and why. Something I've seen as well over my career is monetization can be a dirty word in the mind of some designers. Not all of them, but some of them feel a bit cringy when they talk about monetization. But honestly, you need to design with monetization right from the get-go. Don't tack it in as an afterthought afterwards. Make sure it is properly integrated and works with your core game loops. So that would be really important. And also, my recommendation is be really upfront about monetization. You know, just tell the players what the value is of what they're buying, and treat people like grown-ups. They'll understand. You don't need to hide monetization. You don't need to be clever about it. My suggestion is, you know, provide clear upfront value as what they're getting with their money, and then just go for it. I found as well, I've worked in companies where the only person who was allowed to have an opinion on a feature was either the game design director or the game designers, and everybody else had to shut up. Actually, that was an Indiana Jones game, so big title for a big company. That is also a recipe for disaster, so I'm certainly not recommending design by committee, but do get your team involved. So on Shuffle Cats, we get the team very much involved, and we're experimenting with things like Lucky Charms and stuff like that, and we really listen attentively to what everybody from dev, QA, sound have to say about the feature. So we really pay attention about that. The last thing, especially if you're an indie video game designer, think of virality. How are you going to make sure people talk about your game? How can you leverage you know, the social platforms like Facebook? Also, make sure you incorporate it in the core game from the get-go. Theme and narrative. So in Shuffle Cats, we have a really awesome theme. So basically, You're part of a gang of cats, and you're prowling and playing playing cards, sorry, on the rooftops in the 1920s. Very like a jazz feeling, swanky, ritzy, and we've got a cool cast of characters. We've got Walter and Frank as examples out of Shuffle Cats. The theme is a very powerful thing. It's going to help you with your branding, the marketing, and it's going to create a whole universe for your world. So be mindful about the theme. Something also that we did for Shuffle Cats. So Shuffle Cats, again, is a casual multiplayer card game. We actually went out and hired a guy in Hollywood to do script writing for us. And you're saying, Regis, you're nuts. Like, what the hell? Why would you want to do that? And it ended up being super useful. So we created a cast of characters, which are all of our cats, Ruby, Monty, Walter, Frank. And what we found, and we created a backstory to the little world of Shuffle Cats. And what we found ultimately is that little piece of work we did on the narrative helped the art team ensure consistency, and they had better ideas on how to design the characters. We felt that it even helped the game design team, and it helped, branding and marketing. We really created a little universe. So even though 97% of the whole narrative that you'll find that we worked on for Shuffle Cat is completely hidden from you, it was the effort, which wasn't big, was definitely worth it in terms of how it helped design art and just create a consistent world. The next maybe piece of advice I have for you guys is design for cheap. I mean, you're excited, you want to code in Unity, so easy to use Unity, but think about it. I mean, time is money. Maybe some of you, again, are working for a smaller company. Think about what you can do that does not involve coding. Can you paper test it? We had the opportunity of working on a card game. We could do a lot of the testing just with a deck of cards. There's some additional tools, like we use Proto.io as a visualizing tool when we're doing our UI flows, or we want to try things out and see how it's going to feel, and things like that. And the other thing is, if you're really not sure, it's a bit more experimental, do a throwable prototype. Just don't get caught up making it production quality if you don't know it's going to be fun yet. So, well, talking about fun, I think this is the number one thing I'm going to say to you guys today, is finish the feature before assessing its fun factor. I've worked on a lot of teams where they would finish all of the various features at various degrees of completion, 60, 70, 80%. And I would play it and say, well, it doesn't really feel fun to me. And I'd say, well, wait, Regis, wait until we add the particle effect. So this is not the final animation, or we haven't tweaked the values. And it's really hard to assess a feature without properly finishing it. And so my suggestion to you today is finish the darn feature, and then if it's not fun, you know what? It's probably not fun. There's no excuses that it's not fun because this, and this, which I've heard a lot. My biggest pet peeve is the next one. Do not add features to compensate for a game that is not fun. There's this sense that if you're not feeling it, it's not quite there yet, and then you say, well, it's going to be fun if we add character customization on top of it. Oh, we need a bigger meta layer, or we're going to add a side quest, or a bonus mode. No, do not do that. If what you have isn't fun, fix that before moving to anything else. I think this has been probably, you know, it's a big issue still. So do not add features to compensate for something that's not fun. Fix the core game loop. And work on the meta layer once you have a nugget that is really solid and works well. And stick to the KISS principle. Your opinion does not matter. So as producer, game designer, whatever, studio director, you might think this feature is the best thing since sliced bread. It might be. I really hope for you guys that it is, but maybe it isn't. So do your homework. First of all, ask your team. If your team doesn't believe in it, it's probably rubbish. So number one, really free, ask your team. Secondly, here at King, we use playtestcloud.com. You can get people for very cheap to test your game and fill out a report. You can send an early bill with an explanation on what they're supposed to test, and you get a report from people who aren't working for your company and have an outside opinion. So even if you're an indie game developer, I really encourage you to use services such as that one. There's probably a lot of other ones that I don't know about. Very cheap way to get feedback before you go too far down the road. Do focus groups. Focus group, of course, involves getting people to play a game, asking them questions. There are lots of really great companies in London that will organize focus groups for you, do all the coordination and the sourcing of the people. I think that's super valuable as well to hear them live or see them, because usually there's a camera, you can see them struggling with the UI, not understanding how to finish a task in the game. Super good. I'm going to go really quickly on the other ones. Google has some really great stuff to do beta testing, and will even help you get some beta testers in the game. Not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, but if you guys have an Android build and you know, you use the Google Play Dev Console, look at the things Google can do for you for your closed beta, open beta. Understanding schemas. Okay, so what is a schema? Again, this is a game design topic. A schema is a set of knowledge that the user has before starting to play the game. So if you give me a first-person shooter, I love first-person shooters, I know that the right trigger on my controller is going to be used to shoot. So you probably don't need to explain that a whole lot to me in the tutorial. I'm going to get it. However, if as a designer you decide, hey, no, I'm going to put it on the left, on the left trigger on some other button, then you need to consider from a tutorial and explaining point of view that's going to be a whole lot more difficult, and you're going to really need to drill the point in. So for example, we're doing Shuffle Cats. In the beginning of the game, we had initially 69 levels, and then it brings you to a place called Lucky Lane, and then you can play different card clubs, and we have no more levels. So if you've played Candy Crush or any of our Saga games, we've got 2,000 levels. So what we're seeing in playtests is people were, well, where's level 70? I can't find level 70, I'm stuck. And we were actually changing schemas on them. They thought they had a Saga progression because they've played other King games, and suddenly no more Saga progression, and that caused a lot of confusion, and we're still seeing it in some of our reviews today. So I just be mindful of what schemas are. They can help you because you might have a player that comes in with a preset of knowledge that you can leverage, and they can also harm you if you're not doing what the player is expecting. So that's also good to know. Kill your babies. So after several iterations, if something is still not fun or performing from a key performance indicator point of view, do not add duct tape, strings, wrappers. Take a shotgun, aim carefully, shoot the darn thing. So I see a lot of, in my career I've seen a lot of games just trying to patch things up and, oh, we're going to try this and that and this and that. At some point, take the shotgun, kill it, be brave, fail fast. So that would be really strong. So we did that on Shuffle Cats. Shuffle Cats, we currently have 13 levels in only one street. You don't need to understand exactly the details, but we used to have 69 levels, 5 street, and 5 boss battles. We killed 4 streets, 4 boss battles, a whole shitload of artwork, because we realized that it was hurting our KPIs. Basically, people were spending a whole lot of time in the streets, not enough people were reaching the card clubs at the end. It was hurting our monetization. So we took a very difficult decision to rip out like 2 or 3 months worth of work and just shoot it out the garbage. Definitely the right decision to do, a hard decision of course, but you need to make these decisions. Vertical slice. I don't know who's familiar with the term. Okay, so quite a few. A vertical slice is a section of your game that reflects the complete gameplay. So I'm going to take a super simple example. Let's say you're doing a first-person shooter, you're doing the campaign mode, and there's 10 missions. A vertical slice might be doing one complete mission, start to finish. I really recommend, if you're not doing that, to do vertical slices. You're going to be able to use them to demo your game to potential publishers, assess the length of a mission, assess the production flow of a mission, like the creation of the animation, art assets, and so forth. You can use them to do playtests, focus groups. Really super useful thing to do. They don't need to be long. I remember doing my first, an early vertical slice was for Dead Space for Electronic Arts, and it lasted about 2 minutes. And I would challenge anybody to play it with. It's a horror game with headphones on in the dark room. Yeah, I mean you'd be scared, and it just lasted 2 minutes. But it really demonstrated very powerfully what we wanted to do with the game. So it can be short, it should demonstrate what good looks like. So when you're saying, hey, we want 9 other missions like this mission. And I find also from a team point of view, the team is a lot more motivated when they have something complete with effects, with sounds, with animation, that they can play start to finish. It's also just good for team morale. Bits and bobs, and I think that's my last slide. Don't code things for the future. If you don't need it now, for God's sakes, just don't do it, okay? Just the only thing, caveat, is work on a solid architecture. That's like building the foundation of the house. Everything else, if you don't need it now, don't do it. Have crash analytics. 50% of 1-star reviews, and reviews are super important, are because of crashes. So make sure you've got crash analytics. Unity allows you to do great crash analytics for iOS. Localize your game if you're going to be doing play testing. In a super quick, we found that by localizing to the country where we're doing some play tests, we saw that it changed a lot of our numbers. Do analytics day one. Basically, send all the game start, game end events, etc., and do that really, really early on, as soon as you've nailed the core thing, because you're going to be wanting to examine your funnel and where people drop off. And that's it. So.
Hello everyone, thank you for the intro. So my name is Andrei Milov. We're part of Microsoft, me and David. I think you've seen David before, he's been presenting here with Unity stuff. So we're part of Catalyst team. This team is based here in London, but also across the globe. What we do is we engage with partners and we engage with top startups and innovation labs, and we try and build innovative tech. So obviously, HoloLens is one of them, so we're heavily involved in this. Before I continue, I have to say that we are not HoloLens team members. We're not part of the product team. We don't know what's coming next and what they're working on, unfortunately. But we do know about the development kit and how to get started, and that's what I'm going to be focusing on today. To talk about that. So, just as a session agenda, we're going to talk about real-world partner engagement. This is something that we have done with HoloLens, so we worked with a partner from Finland, and I'm going to tell all about the architecture, how that worked, and what we've developed. And then also going to do a brief overview of the hardware. I know you've seen that before, but I'm just going to talk more about what you can do. And then I'm going to do a live demo. That's hopefully everything's going to go well. And then I'm going to talk about how you can architect apps. And David is going to come in and he's going to talk about how you build UIs for HoloLens. So our first partner scenario that we had here in London was with Intopalo. So Intopalo is a software vendor. They're based in Finland and they work a lot with manufacturing companies. So basically, it's not really a simple scenario. You wouldn't think that, manufacturing companies are interested in VR or Unity in any way. But they are, because what they were thinking is that how can they train new workers that enter their production line? They wanted to use AR and VR for them to be able to see the production line, get training, hands-on training with how they should assemble the engine or certain parts, and then get going. If you put them straight on a production line, if they make a mistake, that costs them thousands of dollars, even more than that. So obviously they want to get rid of that as soon as possible. So this was our scenario. We engaged with them, and in 3 days we had to think about how we envision this, how we develop it, and then have a working demo. All in 3 days, and we've done that. Now I'm going to show you a video about the outcome of that engagement. There's no sound. Sorry about this. Hopefully this works now.
My name is Andrei. I'm a software development engineer. Our team focuses a lot on engagement with partners, with startups. We want to skill them up in new and emerging technologies.
My name is Lauri Kortepää. I work as a technical project manager at Intopalo in Finland. Core business is to provide high-quality software development services for Finnish and customers abroad.
They wanted to see if Microsoft can help them build a simple scenario. They also have loads of customers asking about VR and AR space.
We have heard a lot about HoloLens. This week, we were given this great opportunity by Microsoft to give us the first try.
We had a very limited amount of time, 3 or 4 days in total, to actually develop the demos. One of the things that we really focus on is to work with the partners. So I had to make sure that we train them as we go through this process. If they wanted to spin up another prototype for, let's just say, another customer that they face, they will be able to do that themselves. We wanted to demystify the development in this field and show how things can be done from HoloLens. We try to make them start their scenes on their own, being able to create all of these development tools on their own. And now hopefully when they have new engagements, they'll be able to do that on their own.
We're very much looking forward to be able to demonstrate the same AR experience to our client. They're very keen on the technology.
This engagement, we had loads of tools that we've reused, and some of them we've actually improved. And so we're definitely looking forward to sharing this out to GitHub and to the developer community and seeing if someone finds this useful.
Cool. So today I'm actually going to be showing you the stuff that we've shared. It's all open source now on GitHub, so you'll be able to take this and try it out at home if you want to give it a try. So now let's talk a little bit about HoloLens in general. So for some of you that haven't seen this, this is HoloLens. Everything in here it's self-sufficient. So this is the first holographic computer which is fully untethered. So I don't have to connect this to a computer. I don't need anything to power it. You can move around the world and it will be able to run any application that you want. So it's running full Windows 10. You can run all the Windows 10 applications that you know, and of course the 3D demos, which are the ones that we're interested in. Now, the cool thing about it is that this gives you a lot more ways of interacting with it. So you can place things in your environment. It understands that this is the floor, that's the wall, that's the ceiling. It understands that there are objects in front of you, that that's a table, that's a chair, and so on. And so you can use that to create your experience, your demo, or even your games. You can make them a lot more interactive and based on your environment. So that opens up way more ways of building a game so that you don't have it just in the screen in front of you, all of a sudden it's in the world around you. So that opens up a lot of possibilities, of course. So now, if you want to start developing with HoloLens, I'm going to go through some of the most important things to keep in mind. So now, what are actual holograms? Now, these holograms, the way that this device works is that it projects light in your eyes. So when you look towards an object, let's just say it wants to render a hologram there, it projects light in your eyes to fool you that basically there's something in your world. What this means is that you can create any assets you have in Unity, so like 3D models or textures and everything else works in HoloLens as well. And that's how it's being projected. One of the things to keep in mind is that black is transparent because you can't project black into your eyes. Obviously it doesn't work, so you have to think of other colors when you want to develop it. So here are the main ways of interaction with HoloLens, which are specific to this device only. So of course the first thing is the gaze. You always know well where the user is looking, so you always get a vector of exactly the user's gaze at any point. You can detect gestures, as some of you have seen in the demos. You can detect like the bloom, or you can detect the tap. And then also you can click and drag, so you can do this. And it detects that your hand is moving while you're clicking, basically. Voice commands are incredibly good. It has the 4 array microphones from a Kinect, and they're all put in here. So obviously it understands everything that you're saying, and it's extremely quick to do that. Spatial mapping, very important, is the one that as soon as you start, it starts mapping your environment. It knows where you are, so it has 4 sensors in front, which have a very, very good field of view, and they track everything in your room. And then it reconstructs the mesh as you go around, and it also keeps it in memory. So if you go back to the same room again, it already knows it. So this actually helps development. Spatial audio is another thing that's not being talked that much, but it's absolutely amazing. You can make holograms talk to you, and it will trick your brain into thinking that that thing is actually talking to you. You will hear the sound from outside of your head. It's that good. So this is something that you need to experience for yourself, but it's mind-boggling sometimes. And another thing is that you have real-world coordinates. You know that that's an object there, and you can put holograms that tell you, for example, in our case, how do you assemble the engine? Well, you need to pick the speed, you need to do it there, and you need to do it in a certain way. So looking more at how things work, this is the architecture of HoloLens, basically, in terms of development layers. Everything that comes from Windows Holographic, this has been given to you. So you've got gaze, you've got gesture, voice, spatial, and so on. It's all part of the Windows 10 stack, so you get that. Now, this is the one that I'll be talking about today. This is an open source HoloLens toolkit. It's all on GitHub. And they have loads of stuff that has already been built for you. So you've got cursor, you have prefabs on spatial mapping, utilities, shaders, and so on. All of these things just work out of the box. Like literally, you can drag and drop things. Like I'll show you in the demo, in 5 minutes you're good to go. You can understand the environment, you can interact with it, and you can pick up holograms in place to work. All of this is already done, and it's really, really good. Of course, this is where you come in. This is what you will be building, and it's exactly like game development. Like nothing really changes. It's the same thing. It's just that this is being built on HoloLens and need to move around in your world. But materials, models, scripts, texture, shaders, they all sound very familiar because that's exactly how you build games in this one. So now let me go through a demo, and I will show you how things work. So try and do this. See that? Cool. Now I've got here, this is Unity, so obviously you are quite familiar with this. Now, before I get started, like I said, on GitHub, you will find this. So it's under Microsoft. We will share the links afterwards, after the session. It's called HoloLens Toolkit Unity. Basically here is where you have all the prefabs, and it talks about, input, sharing, spatial mapping, spatial sound, and all these things. Like, this is a great place to start. If you want to start developing, this is the place to go. Now, to get this working, I recommend just to download this as a zip file. And then when you open it, you will have something like this one. Obviously, a Unity project. And to get going, I'm not going to do it now because it takes time, but open up Unity and then just export the whole package. And at that point, you can import it in any project that you want, and it's just drag and drop. So you'll have this toolkit Unity package here, which you will import whenever you want to develop. So let me show you what I've done here. I've done this before, so now I'm not going to do it from scratch just to speed things up. But what I've done in this scene is I've copied and imported the toolkit. So you can see it down here. Hopefully everyone can see it, but it's called Holland's toolkit. Yeah, and in here, you've got loads of things. So most important ones are input. This is the one that looks at the input from the user. So here you have scripts like gesture manager, and then you've got the gaze manager as well. And what happens when you focus on an object, when you gaze at it, when you don't gaze at it, you've got all these already built for you. And you've got other examples, like for example, the sharing. This helps you if you want to have two Hollanders talking to each other. You drag and drop this scene again, they just work. I mean, it's really, really well done. So what I've done in this scene here, I've created something called managers, and I've dragged from the input scripts gaze manager and gesture manager. So let me just show you very quickly what it looks like. In here, the gaze manager, what it does is that it's constantly looking at where the user is looking. So you've got access to the camera. As you can imagine, in the main camera in the Unity scene, that's the user. So when it's moving, the camera will be moving, and wherever the player is looking, that's where the camera is looking. So what it does here, updates the raycast every time, and then it looks if you're hitting an object. If not, then it sends this object. So they're using this send object architecture quite a lot. Every time you look at something, it says, oh, this object is engaged now, so send it a message. If they have a receiver, that's fine. If they don't, that's fine as well. Like nothing will happen. But if you want to implement something, you drag and drop the script, and you listen to this event, and you're good to go. Now, other things that I've dragged in here are the gaze manager and the gesture manager. This is the one when you can tap and you do something with the object. I'm not going to go into details of how these things work, but they're all done for you. So another cool thing that I have here is this thing called spatial mapping. And this is a prefab. I didn't have to do anything but to go to prefabs here and drag and drop this in my scene. And that's it. Now I can map the environment around me. It's that, again, that simple to make it work. So if I run this demo, I'll show you how it works in the editor. Now, you can move in the environment like a user can. So you can move backwards and forwards. You'll see this cursor, which is hitting the object. So I'm taking the normal of what that object looks like. But this cursor will always hit will also hit the floor, and like the chairs and the objects in front, it will detect that as a mesh and it will hit it. So you'll get the normal out of that. So what I did in this demo is if I click on the cube, does that, you know, fascinating. And then on this one, if I click on it, you can drag it, and then I can place it somewhere else. But this becomes obviously a lot more powerful when I move to deploying on the device. Let me try and do that now. So there you are. That is the main menu. I don't know if you've seen this before. It's just like Windows 10. This is the tap gesture, and that's how you can go through items. And the bloom, you disappear like that. Now that's a cool thing you can do. Now it will start map in a while, but basically when I tap, this thing starts building my environment. So that's one of the things that it does. Now, because I'm in the start menu, it doesn't like go all the way, but when you open an application, it will go. So now let me show you what I've done. That's the play the loop demo. So when you start Unity up, of course you see the Unity logo. And those are my cubes and my sphere. So, you know, if I tap on that, it becomes bigger, and walk around it. But now this one, when I grab this one, you will see that now it starts mapping my environment so that it knows this is a floor. So if I go down, it doesn't go down. So it hits the mesh. I'm in, so I'll just put it on the floor there. There you go. Now I place the sphere down. So you can walk around, look at them. Now it has a 1 meter occlusion field. You can change that, but that is best practice because it gets people very dizzy. You go so close to a hologram, it's just too much light in your eyes, and they get a bit dizzy. You can change that, but I haven't. Okay, so that's the demo. Live demo. Actually work. Cool. So now let's move away from this and talk about the actual scene that we've done. So this is the scene that we've finished with the guys. This is not production level code in any way. We coded it in 2 days, so do not take this architecture as the best in the world. But what this does is this: you have an engine, you have a toolbox, and it goes to like a scene manager and allows you to assemble the engine. So let me show you a video of how it works.
Welcome to Hollow Assisted Training. My name is Steve and I'm your supervisor. Please tap to place the engine you will be working on. Good. Now tap again to place the engine. Good job. Now tap anywhere to pick up your toolbox. Nice. That's it. You're ready to start assembling the engine now. Please follow the visual cues. Great job. You assembled the engine.
Okay, so that's a very simple idea, but obviously it's just a prototype, like I said, not production code in any way, but it proves the point that you can do something like this. You can train someone to follow some instructions, and then that is the high score. So actually, the thing red in the middle, David is going to explain that, but that was kind of a timer. So it starts with green, but obviously I failed because it became red, so I wasn't fast enough. But, you know, in order to do this, we did have to think about the architecture. There are some things that happen in the scene, even though it's such a simple thing. You need to think about, you know, how do you make the scene progress? How do you have the scene manager, which takes all of this account? So the way that we've done this is to use a lot of singletons. Now, with the toolkit from Unity, it helps you build that in just 2 lines of code. David is going to show you that soon, but when you take a class, you can make it a singleton and you can fire it from everywhere else you want. The way that HoloLens team have done it a lot is to send messages. If you want to send something to an object, you send a message. If you want to listen to it or not, you know, that's their thing. What we did is we used a lot of singletons, so we call the functions exactly when we want to do it. So we kept the scene manager in the middle. He's the one responsible. Now there are different types of scenes, like assisted scene, placement scene, and the scoring controller is very different. And that sits aside, and when it's ready, it just receives messages and events. It's the same with kind of the interaction. It all happens in all the toolkits that I've showed you, so you can keep everything very, very separate. Now, the last thing that we did is to do telemetry as well, which was very important to the customer. Is, you know, how are they performing? Are they doing this well or not? Who are my best, you know, assemblers or manufacturers? And this is something that we haven't finished, but we're working on it now so that this goes into telemetry, then it goes into Power BI or something that analyzes all these events that can be shared with the supervisor so they can look at like graphs and like how people have done that. So that's all possible with HoloLens as well. So now I'm going to switch over to David. He's going to talk about the UI for HoloLens.
Love the live demo. Hashtag courage. So one of the things with the project is we had multiple people working on this. We had the developers working on the scene manager and models and also the UI side of things. And really, what's the best practice to link all this stuff together? How can you do this in a short hack, maybe 2-3 days? And really the idea is to have some sort of interface between the design elements and also what's going on with the scene manager. So there's a couple of ways that you can do this. One of the ways is to use a singleton method. And this comes with the Unity the toolkit, the HoloLens toolkit. It basically has a singleton that wraps the mono-behavior in Unity. So instead of mono-behavior, just put your singleton and class name, and that will give you access to this public method. So this is the receiver, so this is going to be the UI side of things. This is my UI manager. And I might want to be able to say when I have a voice command to trigger this when we restart. So when we restart the scene, I want to be able to update my UI. And all this comes from the scene manager. And I'm very simple. I just use that singleton instance and call the public method when we restart. So that's one way you can do it. Another way you can do it is using the send message strings. And this is actually the way the HoloLens toolkit manages it. So decouples. If you want to write a library for HoloLens, open source it. You can decouple your code using the send message strings method. And so you can actually have a UI interaction. Say you've clicked the restart button, and I want to send that back up to the scene manager. And it will listen to that, and it's the scene. Or similarly, I could have the scene manager listen for an audio command that says, "Hey, I want to restart the scene," and that will send the on restart message back to the UI user action. So you can actually have a static strings class with just constant strings, and have that shared between the UI designer and also the developer. And that should help you keep in sync when you come to develop for HoloLens. Also, then, when it comes to the UI, you might have noticed that the black background that appears, I chose that on purpose because that appears in the video and it appears in the Unity editor. But actually, when you actually wear the device, black is transparent. So effectively, these lines are like neon lights. So this is a completely transparent UI. And it's a very simple UI. We just had one button to reset the scene. And we used a parallax effect. So if you actually move the Z index and move the button closer to you, it's quite interesting because as you move around the UI, you can actually see the parallax effect. It's very easy to do. Just change the Z value. One thing you need to take care of is when you drop in the canvas element, you want to make sure you use the world space. I've tried the other ones. World space is really where it's at. That's where you have to be. The other thing is, of course, the units in Unity are in meters. And so 320 meters is huge, but obviously in the UI side of things, you think in pixels. So hence the scale. I've highlighted that as well. It's very important. You might have, it'll probably be less than 0.006 or something very small. The other important thing is when you approach the UI, the text will pixelate. If you don't change the dynamic pixels per unit, you need to bump that up to 10 and make sure the text is really sharp when you get up close. So here's some of the UI elements straight from the Unity UI kit. So all new Unity 5 users can use these widgets and drop them in. You've got sliders, you've got buttons, you've got XAML input, or you've got input, text input, and you have text labels. And here I was just experimenting with the colors. So white text is most visible. And as I gray the text in, it becomes more transparent. And of course, black would completely not be there, so don't use black text unless you've got a background. And here's some just images with different colors. Of course, you can use opacity. This top one's opacity. This one's like a mid-gray, and then black, which will be transparent completely. And the slider widget in Unity, I advise that you make the thumb at least 3 times larger. It makes it a lot easier to drag across. And also just test the button, make sure it's large enough so you can actually gaze at it and tap it. And the interesting one is the text input. So usually, I'll actually come to that in the next slide. The important thing is the HoloLens input module. So when you drop on the canvas onto your Unity editor hierarchy, you will obviously get this event system. And to make that just work with HoloLens, you just add a component and just type in HoloLens input module, and that is actually baked into Unity. So as I mentioned earlier on, if you want to get the text input to work with the UI component, you actually have to change the build type to XAML. Now, it's recommended that you use Direct3D build type for performance reasons, but if your application is primarily text input, then you might want to switch that down, and you get the system keyboard in there as well. Just before I switch to you, actually just wanted to mention the other recommendation is you can use speech to text as well. So don't be constrained just to type in. Obviously, if you type in something, it can be quite long-winded. So try and take advantage of the platform as well. And that's my advice on UI so far. I'll hand back to Andre.
Thanks, David. Okay, so that was a very, very brief overview of the platform, what you can add, what you can use right now. So you can start building more graphic apps. Now, these are the most important links that you can think about. Now, I'm going to send this on Twitter afterwards, so you can get all these links and all these slides. But basically, get the tools, follow the training. They have very, very good training material. It goes step by step. How can you add these things to the platform? How does it work? And once you get everything done, you can also order the device. But I'll get back on that, because the first thing is that this goes beyond games. And you can actually, this can change the world. This is a device that is brand new. At the moment, it is V1. It's a bit clunky. Field of view is not great, but it's just V1. And you can imagine in a couple of years when these things get smaller and smaller and smaller, this can change the world completely. We might not even need phones anymore if this really takes off. So for this, it's very good news for everyone that's a Unity developer, because most of the platform is based on this. So all of a sudden, Unity is no longer just a game engine. There are many, many corporate opportunities right now, like manufacturing, right? Who thought they will think about Unity? But they are right now, because this is something that they can train their workforce, they can build their business, so there's a lot of opportunities there. High demand for artists and 3D developers. All of a sudden, they're in high demand, and everyone wants them in all the companies around the world. And you don't need a device to get started. You've got emulator, you've got Unity editor, and you've got many other ways to get started. But if you do want a device, we are now shipping in UK, so that's changed since the last time we were here. They're US, Canada, and all other countries. Yeah, I'm not saying it's cheap. It's obviously not a cheap device. It's just getting started. For commercial suite, I wouldn't really bother about that one. That's more for corporations. If you want BitLocker and all of those kind of security things on top of them. If you want developer edition, it's £2,700. I know it's not cheap, so that's why I said you can start without a device. If you want one, feel free to order it, of course. And that's it. Go to GitHub and you can actually get the source code of all of that demo that I've just showed you. You can play around with it, you can modify it. If you want to contribute back, please feel free to do so. We'll be very happy. And that's us on Twitter, so please follow us, and hope to see you again.
Hey guys, so my name is Pete Short. I'm the CTO of Breaking Forth. We're very focused on storytelling in virtual reality. In particular, we are looking at more dramatic stories, more emotionally compelling stories. So what I thought I'd do is I'd give you a bit of an overview of storytelling as a whole, and then really jump into one of the productions that we've recently released called Control, and then talk about everything, not only that we learned from that, which we did through Unity, but also where we kind of see it moving in the future. So I think it's worth just thinking about all of the different areas that storytelling is being, all the different mediums it's been told and how long it's been told. It is part of human nature to tell stories. And we believe that in any of these productions that we're looking at, that it needs to be at the heart of every decision that you make, that every every step along the way that we need to come back and ask ourselves, is it about the story? You know, there's so many cool things that we can do in virtual reality, but if it's a feature or it's something that looks cool but it adds nothing to the story, then we've got to ask ourselves, why would we be adding something like that? So I'm going to start by looking at some of the established storytelling mediums that are already out there, from books, films, theatre and gaming as well. And I guess looking at the different qualities that each of these have. At a very broad level, we can think about, I'd like to at least focus on passive versus active storytelling. And some of the mediums lend themselves more to one and some more to the other. So when we think about passive, we're thinking about a one-way communication stream. So you're completely absorbing the information, you're not necessarily feeding anything back into the story, and you're getting carried along this journey. From an active point of view, it's two-way communication. You might have some influence, you might have some input to give back, opportunities to interact in that space, make decisions as well. So bear in mind that factor, and then I also want to talk about framed versus unframed as well. So when we think about frame, we're talking about looking through a window, have control over what's inside that space, restricting what people can see. So once again, coming back to the audience, really not having any say, they're just absorbing it. To an unframed experience, which is, you know, the content could be in any direction all around you, and, you know, to an extent, the audience has control, even if that is just which direction they look. So if we look at this beautiful little chart that I put together that kind of looks at these two different elements, we can see that where each of these mediums lie in this space. So if we take film, for instance, it's definitely a framed medium. The director has complete control over what's inside there. And it's also a very passive, inactive experience as well. So this is one where you would just sit back and absorb. Take something like traditional theatre. Theatre, to an extent, is still framed. You know, it's on a stage. They might get to choose which direction they're looking on a stage, but they are essentially still within a framed, confined space. Gaming, on the other hand, talking about traditional gaming, still framed on a monitor, but not so much. I'd like to move that more towards the centre because you can have some control over what's inside that frame. Also, it's a very active experience, so at the other end of the spectrum. Then we go a step further into VR gaming, and once again, definitely now we're moving into an unframed space, and also a very interactive experience. There's another one that some people in the room might be familiar with, might not be familiar with, and that's immersive theatre. Companies out there like Punch Drunk, where they will take an entire warehouse or an entire space and they will create these worlds inside there, and you can, actually out of curiosity, have people here been to immersive theatre? Do they know what I'm talking about? Yeah, cool. So basically you can walk through this space, follow whatever story you want, and be able to you know, choose which bits you consume. So it's an interesting medium, and I'll come back to that. But one thing that's for sure is that all of these tend to be blurring. You know, things that are TV potentially moving more towards active experiences. You've got I've seen certain experimental pieces where you can choose your own adventure throughout a TV story, and there's many examples in each of these areas. So now we remove them for a moment and I start thinking about VR storytelling and the elements that it has. We've had a lot of debates in the office, and we kind of see it being somewhat in this space here. Definitely in the unframed, we're talking about virtual reality, so definitely in the unframed. And active and inactive is a really big debate because you know, gaming can be a storytelling medium in its own right. But what we're definitely focusing on is allowing storytellers to be the ones that are influencing that, and potentially, at least in these early days, we're looking at finding narrative-driven content so that you are there experiencing someone's story. So when we bring these other mediums back in, we can see it really closely aligns to the immersive theatre one. There's a lot of elements that are quite similar. So I'm just going to point out a few of these things that we look at in immersive theatre. So firstly, you can look in any direction. Secondly, you can move around within the space and follow whatever you want within there. At times you can interact within there. We take Punch Drunk once again as an example. They will have bits of detail within there that you can scroll through, pick up, take a look at. You can't necessarily, in fact one of the rules that they have is you can't talk, so you're not necessarily talking to the actors, but the actors can sometimes choose to interact with you. And you can explore more freely. So when you think about that compared to VR, you know, it sounds familiar. So then, next thing I'm going to talk about, and this all comes together a bit more later, is the audience. And when I'm talking about the audience, I'm not talking so much about who's your demographic, but addressing who is your audience, who is that actual person that is watching from within this artificial space. So VR requires you to identify who your audience is, like you've never had to before. It's the idea of who am I? So if we take some of these mediums that we've already discussed, film, you watch it through a window. You kind of, any film that you're watching, you're not sitting there going, who am I? What's going on here? Why am I here? Gaming, usually you'd be the protagonist. You're going to be the player in the game. Theatre, you're an observer from within the seats watching it. But then we've got this question within virtual reality, who am I? What am I doing? And there's just this automatic reaction when you put on these things and you're trying to consume the concept that you can get distracted as to, wait, what am I doing here? You've been placed in this other world. So this means that right back at the start of creating a story for virtual reality is asking yourself, does the audience belong in the space and what's their purpose? So some examples that we've come up with ways that you can have, at least in these early days, and what we're looking at with having a more passive experience and observational experience is having a role in that space. So giving some examples here, natural spectator control, which is a production that we've recently done that I'll talk about. You are actually sitting inside a game environment, inside the world, watching this esports tournament take place, and you feel like a spectator inside that world. And very quickly, you don't ask that question, it just makes sense while you're there. I won't go through all of these, but some good examples of other ones would be a jury or a student in a classroom where you're there to observe. You're not necessarily always meant to be interacting, but you still are meant to be there. Another thing to consider is embodiment. So this idea of when you look down and you see nothing, is that an issue? And we're still exploring this ourselves, and we found that in Control we put in a body. We didn't actually put it in all the time. We have these move through the scenes, these fly-throughs that are on rails. And in those times we don't have any body, but the moment you came to a stationary point, we had a body that came below, and it just helped anchor you to that space and actually worked really well. Then you've got to ask, what does this person look like? Do you want something that looks familiar? Do you want something that looks foreign, something that looks abstract? This is an example of the very early models that we had for the audience within Control. And you'll notice that they're very masculine, they're kind of rigid and awkward and suit-like, and they weren't really, that wasn't the audience that we were going to have there, and we wanted to kind of try and make it a little more neutral. So we stepped back and we started going with something a bit more androgynous, something that was a little more relaxed. And an interesting one here is looking at this body position that we had hands on arms and then in the laps, and it kind of, most people that were watching this to start with were watching in the laps. And that, I should say actually that when we were doing this, we've not only released it on the Gear VR store, but we've also, we did a 2-week run in London, and as part of that we had 1,000 people through the door that were able to kind of sample them and kind of observe how they were working in the space, how they were enjoying the space. So as I said, body position. And I guess finally on that point, does it make sense to the audience? And once again coming back to, do they belong in the space? Okay, so then the next question is, what can they do? And this will change over time, and it's very much dependent on which device you're trying to target as well. So, if they are using a Vive experience, they might have more interaction, more movement around the space. If they're doing mobile VR, they might be a lot more constricted in what they can do. So then you can start asking questions about whether they're carried through the space or moving independently, interacting with the characters and objects, and influencing the outcome. Now the next one about, are they alone? It kind of is a two-pronged question. One is, is it going to be multiplayer? Is it something that they're meant to socially experience? And I think that's an exciting place for the future with virtual reality, is that we'll be able to take what could be deemed an isolating experience and making it a really social experience. And so to be able to watch these stories with others around the world, and that's going to be a great thing. But also consider the story. Do you want something that's meant to be intimate, something that's meant to be just isolating by yourself? And then once again, that's something that you need to consider. And then I guess once you do have others in the space with you, should you be able to communicate with them or not? And keep coming back to this, does it make sense? My final one on this with the audience is trust. There's this element of trust that the audience are putting in you as the story creator, and that is anything from that you're not going to shake the camera crazily to make them sick, that you're going to carry them through this journey, that you're, that's not to say if you want to scare someone, go for it, absolutely, but you still have this responsibility that you are taking someone into this new world, and it's up to you to make it work for them. So this is Control. I'm just quickly going to show the trailer for it. Some people may have seen it when I did an open mic a couple of months ago, but I'll just quickly run it for everyone else. So basically Control, right from scratch, I'm just going to talk a few things all the way through it that we went to get from the very early conceptual ideas through to a story and a final story that we've got here. And one thing that we really talk about is this journey, and we're talking about coming back to it, not just the journey character, but also the character journey, but also the audience journey and what's involved with having a compelling experience for an audience. So this is a quote that we had from one of the people at the theatre that watched it, that they felt like they were delving deeper and deeper into this world in every scene that we had. So bear in mind that it's not just a journey character, but it's also an opportunity to take the audience themselves to a different world. So I'm just going to go through some of the just highlights at a very high level, because I don't want to keep it too long, the scenes and kind of what we thought through in each of these spaces. So how we delve deeper into this rabbit hole, I guess. So at the very start, this is the first experience for a lot of people in virtual reality, especially because we took it outside, those that already own the headset, into a theatre space, something that we could get a wider community looking at it. So we wanted a very minimalistic sense of wonder, ease them into this space, and it's kind of on rails flying through into what's the next scene, which is this big stadium that we have. So in there's a lot of excitement that happens, but we're very conscious of still keeping the audience at a bit of a distance from the characters here. We then move into a more hazy, mysterious, closer to the action environment. We've just introduced one of these other characters that plays a big part later on. Spoilers, by the way. And then we go into a more darker, stormy. We've got the weather that's going to play a part on it. There's more panic and urgency in the way that he's playing the game. And you as the audience start sitting closer to the edge of these worlds, so you're kind of teetering on danger, I guess. And then we get to what's the final level in there, and there's one thing we did, as I say a director's trick, but at the moment we're really just learning about what the director's rulebook should be, and there's, I guess, saying that there is no rules, everything is just, I guess, suggestions. And what we found is each time you go into a new world, you need a certain amount of time you haven't seen it before, it's all foreign, try and get your bearings, know what's going on. In this level, we actually didn't do that. We said the moment you're in there, everything starts with the story, and you didn't have an opportunity to really absorb that world, and it kind of gave the audience a sense of panic, because they're following the story, are they trying to know where they are, and it really made the pace start to up the tempo. And then finally, we start getting into something that's much dirtier, something that's more disturbing and up close and in your face. So moving on, talking more about the direction, things that don't work in film. Now, I know a lot of people here will be more from a gaming background, but I think that filmmakers are having a bit of difficulty trying to get virtual reality to work, and that comes about because they've got to relinquish a lot of their tool set that they would usually have. So things like close-ups, cuts in scenes and pans, they don't really work, so we've got to find other ways that we can, other skill sets we can use, like moving the audience around. So here's some other ways that we can do it. So obviously, as I said, if you've got something that can revive, then you can have independent movement throughout a space, a confined space nonetheless, but still you can. You can have on rails, which is what we did with Control. Now we were very conscious of how there's contention about whether we should be able to move a camera. I think the beauty of doing something in CGI as opposed to something that's live action is we could take iteration after iteration until we got something that was slow, something that was smooth, and we actually had head of marketing as our guinea pig. She gets motion sickness, so every time we wanted to test something, it was always put back on her to do it, which was a very fun job for her, and I don't recommend doing it just straight after lunch. Okay, and then I guess the alternative is, rather than taking the audience to the action, bring the action to the audience. If you do need to, then consider the transitions and consider something like fading. You can also think about teleporting. Are they in a vessel? Maybe they're in a car. Maybe they're on a plane. They're moving through a space, and there's a window that they can watch through. Or you just have no movement at all. The danger you have with no movement is trying to get, in Control's case, it's a 20-minute piece, trying to get something that doesn't feel too stagnant, too stale. So if you're in that one space, that was definitely a challenge. And when we did start pushing that idea of moving the camera around the space, we really got that more dynamic feeling. And I think if you do watch any films, take a look next time and notice how rarely they have a stationary camera. They'll either be cutting a lot or they'll be panning slowly through a scene, and that's something that we're exploring further. So as I said, the director no longer can force the viewer's attention because they can't just do a close-up of someone or an establishing shot. So there are still ways that we can influence it. And I'm really quickly going to show some of these that we use within Control. So here we have, and a lot of this we worked with the London theatre community, and we talked about how we can direct attention, especially like immersive theatre, without having the normal way that you could do it within films. So here we've got an example of where we had a spotlight, and all of these are really sort of 5-second examples, but where we used lighting to draw someone's attention. Then next up, we've got camera movement. I'll just jump over that one. That's basically on rails. This is a good example of using the architecture around you so that we can have a corridor, and all of a sudden you've got a very limited field of view that you can look at, say straight ahead through a doorway, those sorts of things. So kind of going through that space, it really restricts where they're allowed to view. Repeated imagery. So this was a good one with Control. We actually had, it made sense to have multiple big screens around the stadium, which was perfect for us because it meant people could watch the gameplay as it was happening and still not miss out on what's happening on the story in the real world as well. So it was a really nice way to be able to do it. But it only really worked because it made sense for the environment that we were in. We tested things like the commentators being orbs that flew around, but yeah, it ended up being, it just didn't seem right, fit right in the space. Character influence is looking at how you can get a character in the space to actually move and draw your attention that way. So we had a beautiful moment when we were doing the live screenings of this, which is like a tennis match moment where everyone was looking one way and then they all turned at the same time. You saw these 20 heads. So we had set up a synchronized player that was able to have 20 people watching it at once, and when everybody moved in the same way, you knew that at least you were directing their attention consistently. And then finally we've got audio. I'm going to talk a little bit more about audio later if we've got time. CGI versus live action. I'm really going to race through these now. So our decision was to go with CGI, as you can see, but we did, and the reason we did this was we could do a lot of quick iterations of testing. We did a stylized approach so that we didn't have to worry about Uncanny Valley, but we found one of our best things was to introduce this level of realism by having the web camera, and that was great and got a lot of emotion from the actors' faces doing that. Would we do it again if it made sense? So we don't want it to be every time we do this, but it was just the perfect scenario to be able to have this hybrid in there. The challenge that we had around, do we animate first or do we film first? You think about traditional animation, you would record the actors and then animate to that. But traditional commentary, you would observe what you're commentating, you'd comment on what you're seeing. So we started with the latter, and we started animating and then going, and then filming, trying to have the commentators doing that, but it really wasn't working. So we ended up kind of having to go and redo all the animation after we'd filmed it so that it was moving quickly. Animate versus AI. We actually chose to go with an AI approach to give it a kind of game-like feel, but I think we were completely wrong to do it. We were able to get this kind of 80% accuracy very quickly, which was great when we had 20 pieces moving around in the space, but the problem was we needed 100% accuracy, because if we had a piece that was shooting another one, blew up in one direction, the next time it blew up slightly different direction, it could vary the whole storyline, and then you've got a commentator commentating on something that's not actually happening. So we ended up, which I'll talk about in a moment, pre-rendering this stuff, and so that we, I'll actually talk about that and that'll make more sense, but it was one of the advantages of doing that was it meant that we had a very predictable, in the end a predictable gameplay that happened every time, but it did mean that once we had that gameplay we wouldn't be able to go back and re-render it without having to make a lot of edits. So this idea of pre-rendering, having high quality visuals, but it comes at a cost. So once we decided we weren't going to have interaction, we were going to carry them through the space, then it didn't matter so much, and pre-rendering was the way to go for us. So, and I'll probably finish with this because I think it's quite an important one. These were the kinds of things we were able to achieve before we decided to go with pre-rendering, and this is kind of what we were looking at after we went with it. And you can see, real-time lighting with shadows, with particle effects, all these things that we're able to do. So once again, this was before and this was after. This was before and after, and before and after. So I will leave it there in the interest of time, but I think that if anyone wants to have a chat more about storytelling and the possibilities that are out there for Unity developers, for all developers, for telling interesting stories, I think VR is an exciting new medium. So thank you.